Good morning, Ozarks. It's a beautiful Monday morning here. We got Roy Rickstrew with you. He's going to be talking about the dangers of spring. Coming up next.
I want to be your disability rep.
And we're back. The dangers of spring.
Yeah.
I thought rather than mud, I don't know what I'd be afraid of, but
Yes.
I don't like the mud.
Yeah, so I have this lecture every year somewhere on one of the shows that I do, but beautiful weekend.
Yes, lovely.
You know, lots of people were out raking the leaves out of their fence line or picking up sticks, or I tilled a couple gardens this weekend.
Oh.
That was my outdoor activity. But so many people that are filing for Social Security disability, when spring comes, you start to see things pop in their medical records that are problematical for their case. And that is likely because they're out assisting, helping, watching, supervising something, these activities. My wife, she sits on the deck and watches me. But, if she tripped off the deck, she might tell the doctor that she was busy helping with the garden.
Oh, yeah.
Right, or helping with the leaves or what have you. And so every year in the spring, you start to see things pop in the medical records that become a problem for people.
Yeah, so language matters.
It does, and the detail matters. And we preach this all the time, right? That you got to give enough details for the judge to understand or for Social Security to understand. Same thing holds true with your doctor. We can't just make blanket statements that I was helping clean up the yard because all of our minds go to picking up sticks and raking leaves.
Bending over, standing up, walking, carrying things, all those things that you're not supposed to do or shouldn't be able to do if you're applying for disability.
And people don't oftentimes understand when they start to file for disability that, you don't talk to anybody about your activities of daily living at the first two levels of that process. Questionnaires that you fill out. But you don't actually have that conversation until you go in front of an administrative law judge. And then you have a 45-minute to maybe an hour process with some, legal requirements that have to be covered, some introductions, so on and so forth. They're going to take testimony maybe from two experts in that hearing. All that to say, you don't get much of an opportunity to talk about the way you actually live your life.
Yeah.
And so we look for a lot of those things in the medical records. We look for those clues. And then, unfortunately, because of how brief the hearings are, there's a lot of snap decisions on behalf of the judge about how these things actually look in your day-to-day routine.
Yeah.
All the more reason why it's important that if you do trip in the yard while your spouse is picking up sticks, you have to make sure you go that extra step to make sure they understand that you weren't actually involved in a heavy physical activity.
You weren't the one doing that. You were just sitting on the porch drinking a mint julep, watching the proceedings.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
And, on the psychological side, too, I mean, this time of year, people start to feel a little better because the weather's nice and it's enjoyable to be outside. And, if the neighbors stop over for a few minutes, that doesn't necessarily mean you hosted a party.
Right, yeah.
So you just got to make sure that your records stay clean and that you really drill down and help everybody understand what you're truly doing.
Yeah, and that goes to the medical records, that goes to the testimony, the questionnaire filling out, all of that stuff. And that's why it's really important to have a professional assisting you with all of that. As a sitting judge for 20 years, I can tell you I've watched a lot of people try their case without an attorney, and it looks easy. We've seen it on TV, but it's not that easy. There are rules that you have to comply with, and one wrong thing, and your whole case is shot.
Yeah. And, I've had lots of hearings through the years, and you can tell when there's that moment that things change. Clients did something that you wish that they hadn't about their activity, and everything changes.
Yeah, that moment, there was a judge in Greene County, one of my favorite judges, great guy, and we'd be doing a preliminary hearing, and you just had to keep your eye on him. Because if you watched, at some point, he'd close the file, and that meant he was done, and you could just stop talking. And smart lawyers just knew to stop talking because it was done. Others would just keep going. But there's always that time when you're like, oh, well, the decision's made, time to move on.
Yeah, there's a judge here in Springfield that you can really tell when his thought pattern switches. I mean, it's very obvious what's happening.
So
obvious where it's going.
So off the wall, off the cuff question here. What's is the presumption in a disability that the applicant? I guess the presumption is that they're not disabled, and it's on the applicant to prove disability. And so the judge starts with the perspective this person is not disabled, and then you have to switch the judge's mind.
Yeah, in essence, that's the case. Now, if you're if you're a reinvestigation where you've been found eligible, then that changes.
The burden shifts. Yeah,
sure.
The opposite. Sure. Okay.
But yeah, that's correct. You have to convince the judge that you're not disabled. A lot of people go in and they think, well, it's all in the medical records. It's there. And I tease about that being the Prego. Was it Prego? Yeah, it was. The Prego commercials from when I was a kid that said, it's in there.
It's in there. Yeah, it's in there. Yeah.
And, people have that perspective on their medical records that everything the judge needs is in there. If it was, we wouldn't be having a hearing.
Yeah, a lot of it's in there. So I've never practiced disability law. So my next question, just because I'm interested, do you ever get cases where the judge just finds on the record and there is no hearing? Does that ever happen?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Really? Okay. So I didn't know.
Put in briefs, and that's one of the things that we do to try to move things along quicker. I'm pretty aggressive in putting in briefs. I put in briefs at the initial and reconsideration levels as well.
Yeah.
I know most people do not.
Right.
And it's kind of the ugly truth about disability law is that the longer the process takes, the bigger the payday for the representative. And so a lot of people just sit and wait, hope that it goes to hearing.
Yep.
I like to sleep at night.
Yeah, I understand.
And so I try to push those things. We put in theories of case, briefs at the initial and reconsideration level. Almost every case that goes to hearing, if I'm able to put in a brief to make sure the judge understands where we're coming from. But yeah, they issue on the records. Sometimes they'll do a bench decision. I kind of famously, I guess, I flew all the way to Denver one time for a hearing, popped in, sat down, judge introduced himself, and he said, Mr. Rickstrew, I wished I had read your brief ahead of time.
Oh, no.
We're done here. And it's like, oh, my God, all the way to Denver. Drove to Kansas City, flew to Denver. Just a Herculean effort for the 45 seconds that the hearing lasted.
Did you at least get to spend the night and have a nice dinner?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
Well,
I went to, there's a Mexican restaurant out there that has a diving show.
Casa Bonita.
Yes, used to be one in Oklahoma also.
Tulsa. Yeah, we actually borrowed the church bus one time and drove all the way to Tulsa.
Yeah, it was a good time. I mean, I had a lot of extra time on that trip, so it was an enjoyable time.
That's good. Okay, well, that's interesting, and it would be interesting to know if you've ever tracked, and you don't have to tell me now, like the average case time that for your cases. If you knew that at some point, and then kind of compare that could be an interesting thing to put out there.
Our system actually tracks that. It would probably be good marketing. It's probably what it would be.
I think it would be good marketing. Yeah.
But, no, I haven't ever taken the time.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. But if you would like to know, Roy can look it up, and if you want to know, you can call him 417-812-6698. Visit his website, UrDisabilityRep.com. Any parting shots?
Enjoy the day. It's supposed to be nice for a couple days, and then get cold again. So
it should be nice.
Make sure if you're able to at least sit outside and take in a little warmth and sunshine too.
Sounds good. And we'll be back next week with more Your Disability Rep.
I want to be your disability rep.